You know, there are times when I think that the only two people in the media, I said this a couple of days ago, I'll say it again, the only two people in the media who are taking seriously what Donald Trump is up to are me and Bill Maher, talking about how it appears increasingly that we're not just like heading in the direction of fascism or tin potism or the end of democracy or whatever phrase you want to use to describe it, but we're there. I mean, Donald Trump has officially ended one of the most important parts of the American experiment by demanding that an independent Department of Justice go easy on one of his buddies, specifically Roger Stone, the guy who's one of the guys who's got the goods on him. Roger Stone could testify about things that would put Donald Trump in jail, probably going all the way back to the 1980s when they first became good buddies. Back in 1780, John Adams, who was, moved on. Now this, keep in mind, this is 9 years before the United States was created as the country we know it. This is back right after the Revolutionary War when we were operating under the Articles of Confederation. John Adams, who ultimately became our second president, and Samuel Adams, whose bar in Massachusetts, and they're not related to each other, by the way, whose bar in Massachusetts was like the epicenter for the Boston Tea Party and for the organizing, in the wake of the Boston Massacre and and the shot heard around the world, all this stuff. Major revolutionaries. These two guys helped draft the Constitution for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that Constitution says, and I quote, "In the government of this Commonwealth, the executive," in other words, the governor in this case, but if you were to apply this to the federal government, it would be the president, "the executive shall never exercise the legislative or judicial powers." In other words, the president or the governor cannot make laws, cannot pass laws, cannot rule in judgment of other people, and cannot insert himself into the punishment of people who have been adjudicated guilty, to the end that it may be a government of laws and not of men. In other words, our goal here in creating the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is to create a government of laws, not men. And now that I've kind of broken that up with explanations, let me just read it real quick. "In the government of this Commonwealth, the executive shall never exercise the legislative or judicial powers to the end that it may be a government of laws and not of men." By taking the judicial powers of convicting and sentencing, Donald Trump has turned our system of laws, not men, on its head. I mean, this is the sort of thing you'd expect to see in Erdogan's Turkey, in El-Sisi's Egypt, in Bolsonaro's Brazil, in Putin's Russia, in Duterte's the Philippines, in Xi's China, in Kim Jong-un's North Korea, for God's sake. But you literally, I defy you to give me one example of any advanced democracy in the world where the prime minister has come out and second-guessed the courts and directed the courts, or the prosecutorial system associated with the courts, their equivalent of the Department of Justice, the prosecutors, to change what they're doing because it affects a friend of his. We are supposed to be a government of laws, not men. I don't know how unambiguous that can be. And if nothing else, I think this is a breathtaking indictment of our education system. Since Ronald Reagan took a meat axe to our public schools back in the 1980s and ended, mandatory civics lessons, a lot of people who went through public schools since the 1980s aren't even familiar with that phrase, a government of laws, not men. I learned that in 3rd or 4th grade, back when we were memorizing the preamble of the Constitution and parts of the Declaration of Independence and Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. I mean, 8, 9, 10 years old. But of course, that was a long time ago. Bill Barr and Donald Trump have now committed a complete repudiation of the most important of the values and structures that actually made this country a democratic republic. And I don't know how we can continue to call ourselves a constitutionally limited representative democratic republic when in a republic, I mean, the functional definition of a republic is that the rule of law is paramount and that institutions that enforce the rule of law are independent of politics. 4 brave federal prosecutors stood up to this and resigned. But if there's not an overwhelming and systematic response to this, to Trump's subversion of the American criminal justice system, our republic is at an end. November could be too late. I mean, here you've got Trump. He tweeted this morning, "Congratulations to Attorney General Bill Barr for taking charge of a case that was totally out of control and perhaps should not even have been brought. Evidence now clearly shows that the Mueller scam was improperly brought and tainted. Even Bob Mueller lied to Congress." That's Donald Trump. Congratulations to Bill Barr. This is the political president inserting himself into the Department of Justice, and he's basically admitting, confirming for all of us, that Bill Barr personally intervened in this Roger Stone case. You know, the DOJ has been saying, "Oh, no, it wasn't improper political influence. It wasn't Barr, it wasn't Trump. We just decided to do it. After we said Roger Stone should get 7 to 9 years, we thought about it overnight." Well, it turns out that 4 of the prosecutors, this is Aaron Zelinsky, Adam Jed, Jonathan Kravis, and Michael Mirando, 4 American heroes, learned that their recommended 7 to 9 years was being overturned in this case, in Roger Stone's criminal case. They learned about this by watching Fox News. No, the DOJ never told them. No, it wasn't their decision. They learned about it by watching Fox News. Trump had tweeted the night before, "This is a horrible and very unfair situation. The real crimes were on the other side. As nothing happens to them, cannot allow this miscarriage of justice." And then yesterday, the reporter said, "Well, you know, did you blow this up?" He says, "I've not been involved at all." That would be a horrible aberration. These are, I guess, the same Mueller people that put everybody through hell, and I think it was a disgrace. They ought to be ashamed of themselves. And then last night on Twitter, he says, "The prosecutors cut and ran after being exposed for recommending a ridiculous 9-year prison sentence to a man that got caught up in an investigation that was illegal, the Mueller scam." One of these 4 prosecutors has resigned entirely, presumably going to go into private practice. The other 3 have said, "Take us off this case. We cannot stay on this case in good conscience." In classic Democratic style, Chuck Schumer, instead of going, on TV and going, "This is treason," which of course is what, Doug Collins or Jim Jordan would be doing, came out and very politely held a news conference saying, "This situation has all the indicia of improper political interference in a criminal prosecution." Right, that's going to really crank up the folks. David Loftman, who is a former Justice Department official, was a little more explicit. He said, "This is shocking, a crammed-down political intervention. We are now truly at a break glass in case of fire moment at the Justice Department." Amen. We are. And then on top of that, Trump fires Vindman, which is against the law, by the way. Punishing people who tell the truth, punishing whistleblowers is against the law. Vindman followed the law. He was given a lawful congressional subpoena, and he showed up and testified. Trump firing him is against the law. Firing his brother for being related to him, massively against the law. But you probably haven't heard about Elaine McCusker. Elaine McCusker worked for the Department of Defense. She was up for a significant promotion She was going to be the comptroller and chief financial officer for the entire Pentagon. So she was like the chief official in handling Pentagon money, or one of them. And this order from Mick Mulvaney, who is not only Trump's chief of staff, but also the head of the Office of Management and Budget, which administers funds appropriated by Congress for things like Ukraine, weapons. Mick Mulvaney said, don't pass that money on to Ukraine. Now, the Pentagon is the agency that's supposed to actually pass the money out in the form of weapons in this case. And she's at the Pentagon. And so she contacts OMB in email and says, what's going on here? And she said, in fact, I quote, we need to continue to give the White House as much decision space as possible, but I'm concerned that we have not officially documented the fact that we cannot promise full execution. That is, you know, we can't deliver the weapons now because of what Mick Mulvaney just said at this point. In other words, she did the right thing. She cited the law. She said, I'm concerned about this. Can you please explain this? And OMB just basically BS'd her. Mick Mulvaney, you know, let's just dance around this. Let's pretend it's not going on. And now, you know, the emails are out there. You can see this. This woman followed the law. Trump has pulled her nomination. She's losing her job, in fact, because she followed the law. Now, she's not a high-profile person. She hasn't testified in front of anybody, so you probably haven't heard her name. But this is just another example of a lawless administration that this goes way beyond just being lawless. This goes to, this is like pouring acid on the structure, corrosive acid on the structure of our republic.